We are never alone. We are constantly assisted by wise and loving guides. In this chapter, we embark on a journey through various spiritual resources available to us. Besides personal guides, also known as guardian angels in tradition, there are numerous conscious forces and sources of inspiration that attempt to help us on our life path. I encompass all of these under the term guides. The concept of guide is thus broadly interpreted in this chapter. It is often thought that making contact with guides is difficult, that they are only accessible in a state of deep meditation. This is not the case. For example, one guide that is very close and always easily accessible is our body. Just directing your attention towards your body, listening attentively, and you become much wiser. The latter, listening, is the most difficult part. Listening requires openness and setting aside your prejudices and fears. If you can take this step, the rest is simple. Insights will flow naturally. Below is an overview of various guides and ways to make contact with them. It does not claim to be exhaustive. Its purpose is primarily to introduce you to the multitude of help and sources of inspiration available to us as humans. Let yourself be guided by your own intuition and use what resonates with you. 1. Personal guides. Personal guides are highly evolved souls who have chosen to guide us through life. Often they have been our friends or family members in a past life. They love us, never judge us, and when we are aware of their presence, we immediately feel friendship and support. Usually we have a male and a female guide. Making contact. How can we now make contact with a guide? The first and most important step is to have trust that they are there. Without this trust, we close ourselves off and are very difficult to reach for guides. Once you have trust, the channel to help and love is open. A good way to make contact with a guide is to use imagination. Do not be afraid to fantasize about who your guide is and what they look like. The guide is essentially not bound to a form. Fixed forms belong to this world, not to the world where the guide resides. A guide can assume different forms while the essence of their energy remains the same. Your imagination can offer you a form that works for you, and the guide can use that form to reach you. The form is always a means. The following visualization can help build your trust and make contact. Imagine a beautiful natural environment, an open space in a forest, a vast beach, the shore of a lovely lake. Choose a place that exudes peace and naturalness, a place where you feel safe. Then imagine your guide is present there. Give your guide a form. Let it be a wise old man, a beautiful elf, an angel, or a mythical creature. Feel free to choose a form, as long as it is a form associated with wisdom and love. Next, start talking to that form in your mind. At first, it's just imagination, but gradually you begin to notice that it becomes more than imagination. Unexpected and surprising answers come. Your imagination begins to feel more real. What happens then is that the guide sends more and more of their energy and personality into the form. They begin to use the form you've chosen to communicate with you. They take over the form, so to speak. Often you'll see the form change somewhat because it becomes attuned to the energy of the guide. The answers from a real guide always have 2 characteristics. They feel loving and warm. You know it's a friend speaking to you. They are never coercive. They leave you completely free. Furthermore, it is important to know that a real guide will never impose themselves. If we need peace, they will leave us in peace. 2. Your higher self. What personal guides try to do is to connect you with your higher self or your soul. Often we are so deeply immersed in the earthly atmosphere that we have almost lost sight of our true selves, the soul. A guide tries to form an energetic bridge between you and your soul. They attempt to connect you with your inner strength, your deepest inspiration, your intuition and inner knowing. Ultimately, you know best what is good for you. It is important to realize this. You do not need your guides. Everything your guides want to give you lies within yourself. Guides want to bring you back to yourself. They want to help you to directly connect with yourself and to trust that deep within yourself, you can find what you need. This idea triggers a wave of doubts in many of us. After all, we are filled with fear and self-criticism. Somehow we find it much easier to believe in the wisdom of our guides than in our own wisdom. Our consciousness is often strongly focused on the negative, fears, doubts, pains. This focus on the negative frequently forms the starting point of our thinking. It's as if you're building a building on a faulty foundation, resulting in the whole building being faulty. The mind is used to further magnify things that are negative. A harmless ache becomes a serious illness. A misunderstanding in communication becomes a general distrust towards the other. Making contact. To make contact with our higher self, it is necessary to change the focus of our consciousness. When your focus is on the positive, on trust and forgiveness, you gain much easier access to your own inner knowing. Your consciousness then rests on a good foundation. Guides always try to help you find your own foundation so that you can feel for yourself what is good and true for you. Through guides, you can connect with your higher self. Another good way to make contact with your higher self is through the inner beloved. Your inner beloved is a part of you. On earth, you live in duality. You are either a woman or a man. As a soul, you are both. You unite both aspects within you. Your inner beloved is the aspect of your soul that complements and completes you. For a man, this is his inner woman, and for a woman, it is her inner man. Imagine that you incarnate as a man. At the moment of incarnation, your feminine energy remains at the level of the soul. It stays in the higher realms, while the incarnated part of your soul focuses on the masculine aspect. This means that when you, as a man, make contact with your inner woman, your inner beloved, you automatically also make contact with your soul. After all, the inner beloved still resides at the level of the soul. If a man becomes more aware of the feminine within himself, he automatically gains access to his soul. He becomes a bit enlightened. He will be more inspired, more open to the spiritual, and better able to engage in harmonious relationships with women. The same applies in reverse for women who make contact with their inner man. You can make contact with your inner beloved in the same way as with personal guides. You can imagine meeting each other in a beautiful garden, and initially, you can give your beloved a form yourself. You can also imagine dancing together and visually examine the relationship between you as you dance with your inner eye. Let your imagination run wild. You will notice that the inner beloved will naturally take on an independent role and show you how to create more balance in your life. Another source of inspiration can be found in your future self. Somewhere in the future, you have already manifested all your potentials. Your soul has fully expressed itself on earth. This future self is your higher self, but fully present on earth. Imagine yourself, full of wisdom, power, and love, shining like an angel in the sky. But on earth, that is your future self. Somewhere in your future, you know how to achieve that. You know how to bring it into being. Making contact. Is it possible to make contact with that future? Does it already exist? Often the spiritual reality is precisely the opposite of our viewpoint when we live in the material world. We see the birth of a child as a celebration and death as something tragic. From a spiritual perspective, birth is more of a binding of the soul, and death is its liberation. This reversal of perspective can also be applied to thinking about time. In our human view, the causes of events lie in the past. The future does not yet exist. Time is seen as an endless chain of cause and effect. From a spiritual perspective, it's rather the opposite. The real causes of things lie in the future. This is the reason behind all evolution. Evolution is a development towards something, towards a certain endpoint in the future. That development can only take place because the endpoint already exists. Everything that lives feels an inner urge to evolve towards that endpoint. It attracts us like a magnet. A child senses what it will do as an adult, and this largely determines its interests. If his adult self is a writer, the child will be interested in books, reading and writing stories. He is guided by his future self, the highest potential within him that wants to be realized on earth. For this reason, we do not need to fear failure. Our future has already been realized somewhere in time. We have already achieved the goal we are striving for. Your future self, this shining angel on earth, is like a lighthouse shining its light into the past. Unconsciously, we are drawn to this beacon of light. It is our inner compass. Often we stray, but eventually we move back towards this light. Somewhere in the future there is a moment when it has succeeded, when our soul is fully present in material reality. That is a moment of mastery, when our soul radiates light in all directions. This moment may still be in your current life, or it may be further away in another life, perhaps even on another planet. The timing of the moment is not fixed. You exert influence on it by what you do or don't do now. But in any case, at some point in the future, your higher self has fully connected with matter, and this future self can be a guide for you in the present. To tune into your future self, start with yourself as you are now. Feel your own core and let go of all your fears for a moment. The fear of judgment from others, the fear of being different, the fear of being inferior, let them go. Focus on your core, which is free from fear. Imagine how you would live from that core. What environment suits the person you will become, your future self who is completely free from fear? See this person in front of you and engage in a conversation. Let your shining future self inspire you and give you advice. 4. Your body. We do not embark on our journey on Earth alone. We always have access to a good and faithful friend who stays with us until the end, our body. Our body responds to everything we think, do, and feel. If this is harmonious, it is good for our body. If it is disharmonious, disharmony also arises in the body. We experience this in the form of aches, fatigue, ailments, and sometimes even chronic illness. Making contact. How do ailments or illnesses come about? We can imagine this as follows. Our consciousness is like light. When we are fully conscious of ourselves, we are fully in the light, our own light. However, when there are emotions or thought patterns in our lives that we are not aware of, for example, a great anger that we do not see, then there are dark spots within us. It is these dark places that disturb our physical functioning. Just as people need sunlight to function well, the cells of our body need the light of our consciousness to function healthily and harmoniously. Illness forces us to self-examination. The physical complaints that arise from the lack of consciousness strongly assert themselves through pain and discomfort. They urge us to self-reflection. This self-examination can lead us to that inner dark place. By turning your consciousness there, that place becomes lighter and the shadow loses its power. The disease heals or the complaints decrease. Illness can help us increase our consciousness and inner growth. The body is a guide. By directing our consciousness inward during illness, we can learn to understand the messages of the body and give the body the chance to recover as much as possible. The crucial step in the process of self-healing is that we see the physical problem as a prompt for self-examination. This is by no means self-evident in our culture. Our body is generally seen as a machine. If the machine is broken, we want the defect to be repaired as quickly as possible, preferably in a mechanical way. Even in the alternative circuit, you can easily become fixated on finding the right remedy, whether it be a homeopathic remedy, a flower essence, or a gemstone. The underlying impulse is the same as in conventional medicine. We are sick, we take a remedy for it, and we want to get rid of it as soon as possible without changing anything about our way of life. The disease is unwanted. It disrupts our plans. Our body can only do its work as a guide if we are willing to listen to the messages it has for us. This means that with every ailment, we must be willing to ask ourselves what the body is trying to tell us. This requires a shift in our thinking, not only in the way we think about our body, but especially in the way we think about ourselves. We must learn to see our body as a good friend who gives us important messages and has our best interests at heart. We must see ourselves as our body sees us, as a creative source of light and healing. If we live up to that image, we take responsibility for what is happening with our body and experience ourselves as masters of our lives. If that light is absent, the cells of our body become confused and do strange things to draw attention to that light. They become ill. 5. The inner child. In every adult resides a child that wants to play, be happy and have fun. A child that can sometimes be very angry too. This inner child is the source of our joy in life. In the world of adults, there is often very little room for such a spontaneously reacting child. Everything proceeds according to rules and schedules. Spontaneous impulses must be controlled. The programming that ensures a person exhibits a certain desired behavior in every situation begins very early. A significant portion of the TV commercials we see are aimed at children who cannot yet read or write. Throughout our entire upbringing, we are constantly bombarded with information that indoctrinates us about how we should behave, how we should be, and how we should feel. It's not just the major culprits of the past, such as school and parents, but also peer pressure and modern media like the internet, television, and magazines that try to persuade people into the most unnatural things. An example of the madness this can lead to is the modern beauty ideal. This is a digitally manipulated, emaciated woman with a facial expression suggesting sleeplessness and depression. How did it come to pass that this image no longer radiates health, happiness, or joy, you wonder? Unique in human history is that we now have a beauty ideal that no woman naturally meets anymore. And so no woman can be beautiful anymore. At the same time, we learn that those who are not beautiful cannot be happy and successful. In all TV series, we see that the beautiful people are successful, and the ugly ones are the villains or losers. The beauty ideal is an example of how an external norm can alienate us from our own nature. The inner child is the guide that shows us the way out of this madness. When we make contact with our inner child, imagine a child somewhere in your belly, the first thing we usually discover is that the child is sad, angry, and afraid. Suppressed emotions live within him or her. This is not strange. Almost everything it wanted and longed for was not allowed. The spontaneous impulses were constantly suppressed, silenced, and neglected. By listening to that child again, comforting it and giving it space to play and express itself freely, you can find your way back to joy and happiness. The carefree happiness of a child can also be experienced as an adult. Making contact. Somewhere within us there is a voice that says, "Is that allowed? Are we allowed to go our own way without considering others? Isn't that selfish?" But there is an important distinction between the inner child and the ego. The ego is very aware of others. It constantly strives for recognition from others and wants to elevate itself above others. Imagine a runner. When such a runner runs from his ego, he wants to run faster than others, to surpass others. Someone who runs from their inner child just wants to run, enjoy the movement, and feel the freedom. The inner child wants to play and enjoy, the ego wants to be in charge. This does not mean that the inner child should always get its way. However, it should be heard and given space. Just like a child within a harmonious family needs space to play and grow. Ultimately, it is selfish not to give your inner child space and to suppress it. By doing so, you hide the best part of yourself. You are not a robot but a human, a source of beauty, originality, spontaneity, and wisdom. Without the inner child, that source remains hidden from the world. 6. The Earth and its guides. Our planet, the Earth, is not a dead thing, but a grand living being with a rich consciousness. The Earth, Gaia, tries to help us as much as possible. She wants us to be happy here and to radiate joy. Making contact. The best way to make contact with Gaia is when we are in nature, away from human society, away from the hustle and bustle and noise. Often, just being in nature is enough to feel the connection. We then find peace, gain confidence, and feel that a path is laid out for us. When we take our consciousness down into the ground, we feel a loving feminine energy that wants to help us. To go into the ground with our consciousness, it can be helpful to first make contact with a tree. A tree is a being that partially lives in the ground. Through its roots, it naturally has deep contact with the earth. If we imagine what it's like to be a tree, by moving ourselves into the tree and feeling it from the inside, we can make direct contact with the earth. From this contact, it often becomes immediately clear what is good for us and what is not. You can ask a question to the tree and receive the answer as a feeling, a suggestion that often comes wordlessly. Mother Earth is surrounded by a host of beings that help her. Think of elves, gnomes, nymphs, and other ethereal beings. Many sensitive people who live close to nature perceive these kinds of beings and have contact with them. Because these beings work in deep harmony with the earth, we can learn a lot from them. Contact with these ethereal beings cannot be forced. By attuning yourself to nature and experiencing the heartbeat of the earth, you naturally become more sensitive to their presence. 7. Cosmic guides. We belong in the cosmos. We are cosmic beings who have chosen Earth as a temporary residence to gain experiences. Making contact. Looking at the night sky is a good way to make contact with cosmic guides. This works best outdoors in nature, in a place where it is so dark that the Milky Way, the backbone of the night, as it is called by the Indians, is visible. After just a few minutes, we feel calm, wisdom, and a kind of divinity flowing within us. Each star radiates a different energy and has its own consciousness. If you look for a while, you may start to feel this and can choose the energy you need at that moment. When you feel connected to a star, realize that you are connecting with a conscious being. Seeing the light of a star is like looking someone straight in the eyes. Make inner contact and start communicating. Stars can tell us a lot about our place in the grand scheme of things. 8 negative guides. By negative guides, I mean all unwanted entities that have infiltrated our aura. They are also known as hitchhikers. These entities generally do not intend to be guides for us at all. They simply enjoy being with us. They feed on our energy. However, they can still have the effect of a guide in the sense that by amplifying the negative within ourselves, they can make a significant contribution to our process of becoming aware here on Earth. How does it work? Someone who is fully present, fully grounded, does not have problems with intruders in their aura. They are unreachable to them. Unfortunately, this is not the case for most of us. Most people are not fully present in their bodies. There are holes in the aura. Initially, we don't notice these holes because there's nothing to perceive, just like we don't perceive the blind spot in our field of vision. But then comes a hitchhiker. They see such a hole as a nice place to stay. Often hitchhikers are deceased individuals who haven't realized that they are dead. Hitchhiking is a way for them to regain contact with earthly life through someone else's aura. When a hitchhiker moves into our aura, we start to notice things. We experience strange feelings, thoughts, and inclinations that we didn't have before. Suddenly we might feel inexplicably gloomy, for example. Physical ailments can also arise. Making contact. The first step we must take to free ourselves from such a hitchhiker is realizing that something strange is going on, that we have feelings that aren't ours. Then we have to discover whose feelings they actually are. The next step is to make contact with the hitchhiker and make them realize that they no longer belong on Earth. Finally, we have to fill the hole left by the hitchhiker ourselves. Why do I now see the hitchhiker as a guide? Because the hitchhiker makes us aware of our holes, the areas in which we are not yet well incarnated. For example, suppose we have the idea that we are not allowed to enjoy ourselves, not allowed to be happy on Earth. With this idea, we suppress the cheerful, joyful part of ourselves, creating a void in our aura. This empty part is positioned in our aura in such a way that it attracts hitchhikers with gloomy, negative feelings. This gloominess confronts us with the fact that we suppress our joy of life. So, the hitchhiker contributes to awareness and is a guide in that sense. The hitchhiker thus has a homeopathic effect. It strengthens our deficiencies in such a way that we start to wonder what is going on. Problems and mistakes are magnified, forcing us to do something about them. A complication that can arise here is that the hitchhiker sometimes presents itself as a guide. Often, the hitchhiker convinces itself of this. For the hitchhiker, it is much more appealing to believe that it is a guide than to admit that it benefits from someone else's energy. The difference is always clearly felt in your heart. If there is doubt, the guide is not genuine.